here it is, the
It's here.
record-breaking largest pumpkin in New York State, weighing a whopping 2,554 pounds. She and I have the same belly button, so I'm very, I'm very attached. But in the reverse. As a woman, it is hard for our voices to be heard without being made to feel like we're being a complainer or hysterical or emotional. And so we tend to put our needs and our own self-advocacy aside, we stuff it down, while rallying around everyone we know, we work with, we live with. And I don't know a mother on an airplane that would put her own oxygen mask on first.
Hello, everybody. I'm Geoff Edgers, the national arts reporter at the Washington Post. We have a treat for you today. Somebody who makes me a little nervous to talk to her because she's a professional. And, I just do what I can here. Kelly Ripa. And Kelly, I'm just going to introduce you quickly. But as we know, we see you on TV on live. We've seen that since 2001. You are an actress, whether it's a sitcom or in the soap operas. You are a mother and you are an author. I'm holding this book. You'll forgive me. I got a little coffee on the cover. I'll give this to my daughter and buy another one for my dad. But you have a book out now, your first, Livewire, long-winded short stories. This is not a memoir, people. Do not go to the memoir section. These are essays, and they're fascinating because we should make this clear. A lot of famous people have people like me who aren't famous write their books for them, and then they put their names on them. But in this case, Kelly, you have written this entire book yourself. It is exactly like the person we think we know, but there are things we learn that we would have never found out. So tell me what would make a person in your position, a happy life seemingly, write a book.
Well, Geoff, first of all, thank you for having me. And I am the nervous one today. I feel like I've hit the big time. Washington Post. I can go home and tell my parents what I did today, and it's very exciting. And I just want to point out that I do own more than just this shirt. This apparently seems to be a shirt that makes me feel comfortable, so I wear it a lot. But I promise, own more than this shirt. What would compel me to write a book? At this stage of my life, I would say would be a combination of stupidity, hubris, audacity, back to stupidity again. It was far harder than I anticipated it being. I thought because I read books that I would be able to write one. And I don't really still understand what compelled me, other than the fact that my children were all out of the house with the exception of my youngest son. He was a senior in high school while I was writing this. My husband was living in Vancouver and actually stuck there because of COVID. They had closed the borders between Canada and the US, so he was there, and I was really alone with nothing but my thoughts and my old journals and old memories. And, you start cleaning out one drawer, and the next thing you know, you're writing a collection of essays, which, Geoff, I thought would be easier and less complicated than writing a memoir. But I think I got that wrong. You probably know better. And I didn't know, honestly, that you were available to write my book. Maybe the next book I will utilize you.
Absolutely. I'm always there if you need any kind of writing tips, though frankly, I should be taking the tips from you. I'll tell you, we're going to get into the meat of this book, but just to give you a little small thing as a writer and a human being, I just love little lines. They're all over this book. You're driving with your husband, and we'll talk about him because he's a very handsome man. And you describe this experience. I'm trying to find this moment where you say, I'm giving him my silence for an hour, or as Waze says, 4 feet. I think that was
Yeah.
the line in there. I couldn't find it in here, but I remembered it. But you have a very good sense of humor, and that comes through. Mark, I want to ask you about this guy. It seems to me like this is you married him the way Axl Rose maybe would get married. You went to Vegas and you got married 5 days after he dumped you. Dumped you. What the heck
Yes.
is that all about? And yet here we are, more than a quarter of a century later, and you and this handsome man are happily married. Please explain to me why that is a good recipe for a long marriage.
It's a terrible recipe. I can't to this day understand why we worked out the way we did, because it starts out on paper. And as I was writing it, I went back and I reread it and I reread it. And I sort of, uh, I, I rewrote a lot of what I had originally written because it turns out it shouldn't have worked out the way it did, and uh, people who marry their co-stars, it's almost always ends in a disaster. And especially the way we got married, we had broken up, as you pointed out. And we wound up doing a segment on Regis and Kathy Lee for a Mother's Day special. And we were not speaking to one another. And I firmly believe, and I still believe it to this day, if smartphones had existed with all of the apps and all of the bells and whistles that they have now, we would not be together because we would have been playing Wordle or shopping for real estate or on a dating app or something like that. But those things didn't exist. So we were compelled, forced, if you will, to interact with each other the way people used to. And we wound up flying to Las Vegas the very next day and getting married. And I think the reason that we have stayed together all of these years is because before we broke up, we were really good friends. We loved each other, and dare I say, we had the hots for each other. At the time we were young, we were in our mid 20s, we were cute, and we really, we were each other's cup of tea. We found each other sexy. But none of that sustains a marriage, right? Because none of that lasts. Everything is affected by gravity. And what we had and what we have now is what we had in the beginning, which was this mutual love for each other, but we had a mutual like for each other. We really liked each other and we respected one another and we grew together and we became each other's biggest champions. And we are not competitive with each other. It's not about who's doing this or who's doing that or who's not doing this or who's. We really build each other up and we push each other up the hill and pull each other up the hill. And we take turns doing that in every aspect of our marriage, in every aspect when it came to raising our children who are grown now. But we were really a united front and we tackled everything about our lives, our marriage, our careers that way as a team. It was a team effort. And if you're not a good team member, you're not going to be a good spouse.
So, you in the clip that was leading into this, you were talking about being the difference between being a man and a woman in this universe. And
Mm.
I mean, I don't know how much I believe you probably know the comedian Sarah Cooper, but she's written these incredible books about their drawings, but they also describe, when a man comes in and he's got an idea, he comes into the room, I've got this idea, damn it, and we're gonna make it happen. And a woman comes in, they're like, she's pushy. Uh, why are we gonna? What the heck? And you have to go. Look, guys, I have a suggestion. I don't know if this is right or wrong, but it's an idea. So
Yeah.
you've lived through this, you've seen it change in the workplace, and that's where I want to get to Regis, who's a major part of your book, or has a major part in this section of your book, which is Regis, who we know as playing Regis very successfully. You came into that show later in the game, and we like to think of our TV people as best friends. That he was your father figure. He brought you in, he nurtured you, but in reality, you were two people playing a role. And you finally deal with this in the book in a way that I think sets the record straight. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Sure. I think there's this common, I mean, I know because I've been on the other side of it, right? So there's this common misconception that the main host, the host that's there, is sort of hand selecting their co-host. And that is not true. It is a decision that happens in private rooms, way over our heads, way above our pay grade. And I sort of take the stance, and it's, if you don't read the book you would really not be able to understand this. I sort of take Regis's side in all of this because he had paid his dues. He had been on this show since its inception. And so I don't necessarily think that he should have been assigned a co-host. I think that when you've paid your dues that long and you've been there, it was, I don't know if it was like 15 years or something, 10 years when I got there. Um, he should have had the right to choose his co-host or not have one. I did not know any of that at the time. I sort of came in really ignorant and not prepared. And after a very short period, I my first co-hosting day was November 1st of 2000, and I was announced as the permanent host. I mean, I was announced in, I think, January or February of 2001, but they had offered me the job in, I think it was December. And so it happened super fast. And I was not prepared for the internal conflicts that went on between these two divisions of the same company. So there was the local distribution WABC here in New York City, and then there was the ABC network. I did not understand that those were different things, that there were different presidents, vice presidents, bosses, CEOs. I did not understand any of that. I thought it's all on Channel 7 here, right? So I didn't realize that we were syndicated and we were NBC and CBS and Fox and ABC, and we were all over the country. And so it was this very strange ignorance is bliss moment for me, but also I didn't get that there wasn't more of like a celebratory feeling. It didn't feel celebratory.
Well,
I
Kelly,
felt
Kelly, I read when I read the way that you describe it, it reminds me a little bit like David Letterman, where or Johnny Carson, to date me even more. They sit at the table, someone comes on as a guest, and you think they're chummy, and then during commercial, they sit in total silence. They don't go out to dinner with these people. I mean, when you would talk to Regis, I feel like you would say, "Hey, I'm going skiing this weekend. Save it for the show." Like it was
savor
just
for the show. Yes.
that was and I think you're very gracious in the way you explain this, but it took you probably a period of time to realize this is a different kind of relationship. This is an old school kind of professional relationship, and you're probably naturally friendly, and you want to maybe be a little bit, more friendly, and that's not what this is.
Well, I came from this tribe of cast members at All My Children. It's an ensemble. There were 40 of us. We were like siblings. We had very that David Canary, who played my father, who was really like a father figure to me. And I had Eva LaRue, who played my sister-in-law, is godmother to my son Michael. We are very close. So many of us are still very close. And so when I came to the broadcast side, I thought it was a very similar thing. I did not realize that it wasn't like that. And so it was, it was difficult being the new girl. I felt like it was the first day of high school all over again. But, I think that Regis had this magic that he was maybe superstitious, ritualistic. He liked everything to unfold on camera. He did not want to hear conversations off camera. Anything I had to say had to be saved for on camera, including
Save it
good
for the
morning.
show. Save it.
Save it for the
Okay.
show was like,
Sorry.
that was it. And like I said, the few times that we did socialize off camera, we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. I still find him to be the greatest storyteller I ever knew. He took you on a journey. And if I'm a good storyteller, it's because I learned by watching him. And it was a great privilege to sit there and watch him. But you do realize, like, people really expected, I think people expected that when he left, I would leave, as if that was a choice that I could make at that time. It's all about keeping the franchise on the air and finding a replacement. And that's what it is. It's like all of those franchise shows, from Stephen Colbert to Jimmy Fallon, Jay Leno, Dave Letterman. Our show is a franchise show in the same way. It doesn't end with me. When I leave, somebody else will join the show. That's just the way it is. And I think that's what people really have to understand, is that there are certain shows where it's really, you may grow accustomed to the people hosting it and you fall in love with them and you want them there forever. And I get that. I was a viewer of the show I thought that Regis and Kathy Lee were married for years. I did not realize that they were not.
She was married to that John Davidson, I think.
I
Was it
like
Kathy Lee Crosby? I've never even heard of her. Listen, I think you handled it beautifully in here, and I'm going to just say I'm going to endorse your handling of the Regis situation. It's very graceful and funny and detailed and well worth reading. I'm conscious of how much is in this book and in your life and how little time we have, so I want to shift over to something which, we look at you as a totally put together, smart, engaging. Really, you made fun of my bosses, the guy from Amazon, his rocket ship. I can't even say what you called it in the book. It's kind of profane, but
It's a little profane.
yeah, you can say it. I can't. Yeah.
I'm not going to say it here.
All right. Okay. Fine.
People I know watch it.
It's in the
Get
book.
the audiobook. Get the audiobook if you want to hear me say it.
Oh, whoa, tempting. All right, wait. So, what you write about, though, in here, just to shift it a little bit, is it's quite courageous. You write about being very anxious when you have to make public speeches, and also just going through. I mean, there's a point where you're talking, I think, to your therapist, and you're talking about how you wake up in the morning just dreading going into work sometimes, and when you're with your kids, you're like thinking about work, and when you're at work, you're thinking about your kids, and Sunday comes, and it's something that is very relatable, but I didn't really understand was going on with you, and I'd like you to sort of explain to us why you told us about that, and what your hopes are for how that is laid out there.
It's so funny because I feel like there are certain things that I say on the air and that I've said for years on the air that don't really land. Maybe people think you're joking. They think you're, trying to rib yourself or be self-deprecating. But I've talked about being extremely socially anxious and this fear of public speaking that I have. Two things that necessarily don't align with the career that I have chosen to have now for 23 years. And so, it's one of these things where it had started to become debilitating. Like I would make it so um, the fear of waking up and going out and speaking in front of the audience and to the audience at home. And if I had something to do after work that involved an audience, I would be like a shaking, like a near wreck. I couldn't eat. If I had to do another talk show in the evening, if I had to do a Letterman, say, I wouldn't be able to eat for the entire day because my stomach would be in knots. And I think it didn't really land until I wrote about it, which is such an interesting thing when you think about it. It's like the written word sometimes has more depth to it or breadth to it, or people take it more literally when you write it down. And I think I wrote about it because I know that I'm not alone, because I work with so many people who are functioning, they're high functioning people that have so much anxiety in their lives, and the way that people choose to deal with it. I mean, there's so many different ways people choose to deal with it. I went to therapy because I found that my coping skills, I didn't have the tools. I had no tools. So my tools were to allow my brain to consume itself, and for me to work myself into a state of terror. When we were doing Hope and Faith, that was in front of a live studio audience every Friday night. And Faith Ford would have to come in and sort of pull me out of the dressing room. And I would be shaking and trembling backstage. And she would just be caressing me and holding me. And she's like, it's going to be great. You have so much fun when you're out there. And she's right. When I'm out there, I have so much fun, but it's the buildup before. And so I really sought therapy as a way to sort of deal with the stress and learn how to manage my own anxiety and learn different breathing techniques, meditation techniques, and sort of asking myself these questions like, so then what? Well, if you bomb, so then what? Well,
Hmm.
well, then what would happen? And the answers are always, well, nothing happens. Life goes on, right? And so I think I wrote about it to prove to people that if I can do what I do and embarrass myself literally at least 6 to 7 times a week, right? In profound and large ways on live TV, and in ways sometimes I embarrass myself in ways I never even see coming, but it doesn't kill you. It really doesn't kill you. And if you can just learn tools to manage your stress, whether it's with an app, whether it's with a group therapy or private therapy, or there's so many different ways now because people talk about it in a more open fashion. And I think the more people talk about it, or somebody like me who may seem put together, but to know that I'm really like the duck floating on the water that you see, and the duck is sitting there and you don't really see the ripples, but underneath the water, the ducks, you see those legs are working overtime. To know that that is happening to me, like as we are doing this right now, I can honestly tell you that if you could see, my legs are shaking,
Oh my God,
and
relax. It's okay. I mean, I'm not even wearing any socks. But look, here's the thing. Because you at one point, I know you got this Botox injection under your arms because
yeah.
you were sweating so much because you were so anxious, right?
Yep. Yep. And let me tell you something. When you are turning to Botox in your armpits, that's
Yeah.
when you know you are not managing your stress well enough, because it was uncontrolled. I looked like I had run a marathon, and I hadn't even gone out on the air yet, and it looked like I had
Yeah.
run a marathon. And I always go back to uh, Albert Brooks in what's the movie?
Broadcast news.
Broadcast
Yeah,
News.
absolutely. It's
I
hilarious.
am
Yeah, I
I
want to
am
ask you
Albert Brooks.
I want to ask you because we only have a few minutes. So Ryan Seacrest, that guy, same problem. Does he say save it for the show? What is he? Is it a different relationship there because you were there and you can influence how that relationship flows?
I think there's some of, I mean, obviously, there's so much of that, right? When you're the person who has been the new guy, you want to make the new guy as comfortable as possible. But with Ryan and me, we have a 20-year prior to this show relationship. We've been friends for 2 decades. And so we have a camaraderie. We're like siblings. We have a very different relationship. In fact, I never thought that they would ever hire Ryan because my fear was that they're going to know somehow that we are friends and that's going to impede the whole process, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think because there's like group superstition, right? When the show started, it was about, when the show started back in whatever, the late 80s, it was about two strangers coming together and discovering what the other did the night before and, all of that on live TV. And Ryan and I frequently have dinner together the night before, but you can still talk about that the next day. You don't have to be complete strangers. I mean, we've done 20-minute host chats based on Ryan FaceTiming me and me going into my husband's closet to figure out what kind of underwear he wears because Ryan's looking for a new underwear brand. I mean, literally, it's like that's that's what relationships can be on TV. We have a very unique, for me, situation because we know each other and we were friends, way before the show. We'll be friends way after the show. It's like that. We really are like siblings, and my
Kelly,
kids.
I'm very interested in, I mean, you've written this one book. It's hugely successful, right? It's like up there with John Grisham or something,
I
right?
can't believe
Uh,
can't believe
I
it.
mean, you
I
you
can't
you
believe
seem daunted in the book. You talk about being daunted about James Patterson. That guy, he doesn't write anything. He just has everybody writes for him. I've written 12 of his books. So look,
it.
you have
He
this great
literally said to
editor.
me, he said to me, why don't, he's like, you should have had a ghostwriter. What's wrong with you?
He has last book he had 7 ghostwriters. But so your great editor, you have this great editor, Carrie Thornton. Does she say, "Look, Kelly, I'm an editor. You've written this amazing book. It's so successful. How about number 2?" Or is that something you're not even thinking about right now? And what would it be?
So right now, she's just letting me get comfortable because she knows me now, right? And the editing she cut 200 pages out of this book, by the way. So there's obviously we could have a book too.
Yeah,
Obviously, there's 200 pages of pure gold.
yeah.
But you know, it's I think my second book would be about me and the attempts I made to try to get out of going on a book tour. Because I write from a place of complete everything that is happening in my life is what I write about. I'm not ready to write a memoir because I just feel like I have a lot left to learn and do and grow. But I never say never to anything, but I will say to right now, I'd rather just sort of sit in the uncomfortableness of me having a book out on the market for purchase right now. I have yet to actually be able to walk into a bookstore right now without us document like the first day the book came out, I walked into the Strand bookstore downtown and I took an awkward video of me standing next to my own books just to show people how uncomfortable I was with the entire thing because it just, Cal Penn, the great Cal Penn, who had uh, been promoting his memoir on my show while my book had just gone into edit. We had just started the editing process. And he said, "What level of self loathing are you?" And it was the thing that I took hold of. I said, "Oh my gosh, I despise myself." And he said, then you're almost done. And it was so funny to have like this eureka, somebody gets me. Finally, somebody
Well,
understands me.
Kelly Ripa, we like you, and I represent America, as you know, and the journalism establishment. This
Thank
is
you,
your
Geoff.
book right here, and I hope people will go out and pick it up. There's a good picture on here. You posted a good picture on Instagram. I'm not sure I can show that to my children either, but look, it's been a pleasure to have you here. I'm sorry your legs were shaking, but honestly, I think you pulled it off. I think it
Thank
went
you,
okay.
Geoff.
All right,
You made it
everybody else.
really easy.
Come back to Washington Post Live, and you'll see the upcoming shows. And I'm Geoff Edgers, national arts reporter, and thanks so much for coming.